Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about some of the miracle stories that are happening right here in our own city, in our own state, every day. My name is Tony Kausha, and the title of our show is Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. Please note, this show is not about religion, and we're not trying to change anyone's religion, and we're not trying to get you to join any religion. It's just about miracle stories. I don't know of any religion on the planet that doesn't talk about miracles. That's why religions begin, because they have something that's telling them there's really a God. But we're not going to get into that. We're going to just talk about miracles and leave the decisions about all that up to you. So we don't care what religion you are. We just want to talk about miracles. If you are an atheist, I think you'll enjoy the program as well, although I can't guarantee you'll remain an atheist very long after you hear many convincing stories, coincidence kinds of stories about miracles. You can email me your own stories if you wish. We'll try to use all we can on the show. I can't guarantee we will, depending on volume and time, but you're welcome to send your stories on to us, and we will mention them when we can. You can send them to the following email address. But please notice that if we do use your story, we won't mention your name. We'll keep you anonymous. And we suggest that in your story, when you send it to us, don't use your correct name. That way anyone listening will not be able to figure out that it was you that sent the story in. The email address you can send your stories to is very easy to remember. It consists of 2 words and 3 numbers. The first word is Tony, spelled Tony, and the second word is and, spelled AND, and the numbers are 777. So once again, the name is Tony and 777 at AOL.com. Well, let us begin. Our first coincidence miracle today happened again while I was passing out cards at a beach. I came upon 2 ladies that were sitting on a blanket, and I was passing out cards to a lot of people, and when I came upon them, handed the cards out, they started asking a lot of questions about the book and about the miracles, and also a lot about God's love. How do you know that God loves you? How do you know that God is watching you and he knows all of your problems, etc., etc.? So I was fortunate that I have enough experience with things like that, so I was able to be helpful to answer both of their questions and explain how we know God loves us, etc. And it turned out that one of the ladies had a son who requires 24/7 attention, and she explained some of it, but it explains a horrendous life. He really can't do anything for himself, and she has to spend practically all of her time constantly caring for him. And her husband was taking up the slack, and they were splitting the time, and they were just getting by. But he just passed away 2 weeks ago, and the last 2 weeks of her life now, with his funeral and trying to balance her son's issues, has become an impossible nightmare for her. And the woman that was with her today was a close friend, but a recent friend. They recently became friends, and as part of the coincidence miracle today, the fact that they recently became friends turns out to be a great coincidence miracle, because this mom, now with a child who needs 24/7 attention constantly, her husband has just passed away, and she's grieving that situation. She certainly needed some help, and this friend on this particular day arranged for 3 people to take care of her son at home, different shifts, so that this friend could take her out for the day and talk to her and help her in whatever ways she could. She spent a lot of time already on this particular day listening to her, and that's why they've asked all these questions about God and miracles, because they feel expressly that they really need to have some miracles. This woman can't possibly handle the situation all by herself, and her husband's passed away. And she was very sad already because of the funeral, etc. And now she's trying to figure out what to do next. And she was overcome by this friend who's loving her, and she shared that with us, that she's never been so loved and cared for as she has by this friend, and they're only recent friends, and she really can't believe all that this friend has been doing for her for the last 2 weeks. And now today, arranging for people to cover 3 shifts so she can get out and catch her breath and talk to her friend about what kinds of help she needs, etc. And her friend now is working on orchestrating some other ways. She has connections and she knows about some government-funded programs that will be very helpful to her, etc., etc. So the coincidence miracle is that she meets this friend only recently, and thank God she did, because this friend now is taking her under her wing and protecting her and getting coverage for her, etc., etc. And the fact that I just happened by talking about miracles and God's love was another part of this coincidence story, coincidence miracle. So once again, I'm so blessed by my mission in life, trying to tell people about God and tell them about miracles and coincidence miracles. When I bump into people like this who are actually living these very difficult experiences, and they're having coincidence miracles of their own, a tremendous coincidence miracle. This friend is a godsend, and that's what the woman who's grieving has called her. And she was crying uncontrollably during most of our discussion at the beach. You know, I could imagine her husband just passed away 2 weeks ago, and her son has this need for 24/7, and now a friend is arranging for it. I mean, it's just a beautiful story. It would make a great movie, actually, but it's a true story, and I thought you'd appreciate hearing that today. Our next coincidence miracle is from someone who tells us they saw an article in a Guidepost Magazine several years ago. It was an amazing story about a teacher at a high school who had a nightmare student, and we'll anonymously call him Bill. She stressed that every day Bill would come in and cause chaos in the class every single day. And one day she was so frustrated and tied in knots because apparently the problem kept mounting every day and her stress was growing every day. She was sitting at her desk before class and she was writing a prayer. Fortunately, she was writing it in shorthand, and shorthand, for those of you who don't know, is a process, secretaries learn that in school. It's a process of writing words by symbols, and you can write words a lot quicker if you use certain symbols that the secretaries memorize. So shorthand is that process of, taking dictation and writing words down very, very quickly as a boss is dictating a letter, for example. So she was writing it in shorthand, thank God, so nobody could decode it. And she was writing this prayer about student Bill. Suddenly, Bill appeared, came in for class, and as he walks in, he sees her at the desk, and he asks, "What are you writing?" And she thought she'd keep it very brief, and she said, "Well, actually, I'm writing a prayer at the moment." And she took it, she folded it up, and she slid it into a book that was on her desk, and then she proceeded to write some things on the blackboard for the class that was coming in. And he took this chance where she wasn't looking, and he pulls the note out of her book, and he stuffs it into his school bag, and he takes his seat. Well, many, many years later, approximately 20 years later, Bill finds this note in his attic at home. And at this point, he'd finished college. He was a manager in a business. So he thought, well, I'll take this in to my secretary and have her translate it because it's in shorthand, and he didn't know what it meant. So he brings it into his secretary. She looks at it. She was obviously concerned. He saw her reaction was she wasn't too happy about what she was reading, and she said, "Look, it's very, very confidential. It's very personal. I'm going to have to decode it. I'll type it up for you, and I'll leave it on your desk before I leave for the day." And he said, "Okay." And here's approximately what this shorthand prayer said, approximately based on what I was told and what I remember. She wrote in shorthand, "Dear God, you know how much trouble I'm having with student Bill, and you see all the daily chaos and confusion that he causes in the class and the arguments that ensue. Bill has the ability, God, to be very, very good, but also very, very evil. Please, God, help me to survive this chaos and this class for this year and not lose my job. And also, please, God, help me somehow to be helpful to Bill in some way so that the rest of his life doesn't turn out to be evil and filled with problems. And then he opted, what sort of story goes, he was planning that very day to do something that was dishonest, business-wise. I guess it was very profitable, but dishonest. He was going to be doing something terribly wrong, cheating someone. And reading this prayer at this moment took his breath away in a bit, and so he changed his mind about the evil thing he was going to do. So this is the moment of coincidence miracle. 20 years after the teacher had written this thing in shorthand, on the precise day where he was going to be doing something evil, he's reading a note that says, "Dear God, he can be very evil." And so it just took his breath away. And he actually looked up the teacher, went back and told the teacher what had happened, and they had a wonderful relationship ever since then. His life has changed. So I hope this story touches you as it touched me. It's a true story. It was published in Guidepost Magazine several years ago. I don't know when. You could check with them if you want to see the original copy of the story. Our next story is a message from a woman who tells us that she had serious pain, carpel tunnel pain, in both of her hands for several months apparently, and it just seemed to be getting worse, and it was excruciating pain. It would drive her to tears. So she would pray about, getting help. But in one day while she was praying, she was inspired to go to her church. I don't know what church that is, but she went to her church, and there's a prayer group in the church that prays for people with illnesses. And she asked them to please pray for her. And they decided to pray for her right there on the spot. She just came in. And she said that the pain instantly went away in like 5 minutes of prayer, and she hasn't had the pain now for about a month since then. So she's so ecstatic and excited about it, she can't wait to tell everybody. And we've talked about things like this in the past as well. Many people have churches that have prayer groups that pray for pain and for illnesses, etc. And we hear great stories all the time from people who benefit from that. Our next coincidence miracle is from a man who tells us that he thought he would try what he hears on many of our shows about people using numbers as clues about what God is trying to indicate for people to do. So he had a thought. He was trying to decide which friend to go visit on the next day, and he was on a highway. So he said, okay, if the next car I see has a license plate with 2 number 1s on it, I'll go to see friend 1. If it has 2 number 2s on it, I'll go to see friend number 2. So that was his plan, and he was praying about it. He indicated to God that's what he was going to do. And the first one he saw was a car with 2 1s on it. So he said, okay, tomorrow. And he set up an appointment with his friend to go see a friend on the next day. And what really was exciting for him, and it's exciting for me to tell you, is when he went to see this friend number 1 on that second day, he said that when he got on the highway, one of the first cars that passed him on the highway had a license plate with 3 number 1s on it. And it caught his eye, and it caught his attention because the prior day he got 2 1s to say, go visit friend 1. But the climax was that when he got off the highway, as he was getting off, he saw another car in front of him or beside him, passing him, I don't know which, or maybe after he got off the highway, I don't know. But he says at the end of the trip, he saw another car with 3 1s on it. So this was the trip he set up because he prayed about it in the prior day. And on the day he's actually doing it, he sees 3 1s as he gets on the highway, and he sees 3 1s as he's getting off, which is confirming that God wanted him to see friend number 1. I want to remind you to Google the title of our books, Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. Google Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles and consider giving the book as a gift for Christmas to someone. God bless you all. I'll talk to you next week.